The morning sun rose slowly over the great estate of Velka, the dragon diplomat. Her home sat on top of a tall hill, surrounded by gardens that stretched far and wide. The flowers there were not ordinary flowers. They were ancient plants from many worlds, brought here over hundreds of years by dragons who traveled across the stars. Velka stood on her balcony, her golden scales shining in the early light. She was tall and powerful, with wings that could cover a small house when fully opened. Her eyes were deep red like rubies, and they held the wisdom of 300 years. Among the Ember Council, the ruling body of all dragonkind, Velka was respected and feared. She had ended wars with her words alone. She had made peace between species who had fought for centuries. But today, she was not thinking about politics or treaties. She was watching the gardens below. A small figure moved between the rows of plants. It was Yuna, her human gardener. The woman was young by human standards, perhaps 30 years old. She had dark hair that she kept tied back, and she wore simple brown clothes that were already dirty from the soil. Yuna had worked at the estate for 2 years now, and in that time, the gardens had never looked better. Velka watched Yuna kneel beside a bed of blue flowers. The human's hands moved gently, carefully removing dead leaves and checking the soil. There was something almost peaceful about watching her work. Still, Velka did not think much of humans. They were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. Dragons had been crossing the stars for 50,000 years. Humans were useful as workers and servants. They were good at small tasks that required patience, but they were not important. They were not worthy of real attention. This was what Velka believed. This was what all dragons believed. She turned away from the balcony and went inside her chambers. There was much work to do. A meeting with the council was coming in 3 days, and she needed to prepare. The matter was serious. A dispute between 2 powerful dragon clans had grown violent, and Velka had been asked to find a solution. The day passed quickly. Velka read reports and wrote letters. She spoke with advisors through holographic screens. She ate her lunch alone, as she always did. Her mate had died long ago, and she had raised her 2 hatchlings by herself. Kira and Torin were still young, only 50 years old. For dragons, this was like being a child. They would not be fully grown for another 100 years. In the evening, Velka walked through the halls of her estate. The walls were made of dark stone, decorated with carvings that told the history of her family. Torches burned in iron holders, casting dancing shadows. Everything here spoke of power and tradition. She passed by a window and stopped. Below, in the gardens, she saw Yuna again. But this time, the human was not alone. Kira and Torin were with her. Velka's heart jumped. What were her children doing with the servant? She watched carefully. Yuna was sitting on the ground, and the 2 young dragons were sitting beside her. They were looking at something in Yuna's hands. It appeared to be a small plant, just a seedling with a few tiny leaves. Velka felt anger rise in her chest. Her children, the heirs of a great diplomatic family, were sitting in the dirt with a human servant. This was not proper. This was not how things should be. But she did not move. Something held her in place. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was something else. Yuna was speaking to the hatchlings, but Velka could not hear the words from this distance. Whatever she said made Torin laugh, a sound Velka had not heard in a long time. The young dragon's blue scales seemed brighter somehow, his yellow eyes full of joy. Kira, who was always serious and quiet, leaned closer to look at the seedling. Her silver scales caught the fading sunlight. She asked Yuna a question, and the human answered with a smile. Velka stood at the window for a long time, watching. The scene below was strange to her. Dragons did not sit with humans. Dragons did not learn from humans. Yet here were her own children, listening to every word this simple gardener spoke. Finally, the sun began to set. Yuna stood up and bowed to the young dragons. Kira and Torin bowed back, which surprised Velka even more. Then the hatchlings ran toward the estate, their small wings flapping with excitement. Yuna remained in the garden. She looked up at the sky for a moment, at the first stars appearing in the darkness. Then she went back to her work, kneeling beside the flowers once more. Velka stepped back from the window. She felt confused, and she did not like feeling confused. Tomorrow she would speak to her children. She would tell them that spending time with servants was not acceptable. She would remind them of their position, their duty, their blood. But even as she made this decision, a small doubt grew in her mind. She had seen something in that garden. She had seen her children happy in a way she had not seen before. And she had seen Yuna, a creature she had always ignored, showing kindness to her hatchlings without expecting anything in return. That night, Velka could not sleep. She lay in her great bed, staring at the ceiling. The faces of her children kept appearing in her thoughts, their smiles, their laughter. The way they had looked at that tiny seedling as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. Perhaps tomorrow she would not speak to them after all. Perhaps she would simply watch again. Perhaps she would try to understand what magic this human gardener held. The moon rose high over the estate. In her small room in the servant quarters, Yuna slept peacefully, unaware that she had captured the attention of one of the most powerful dragons in the galaxy. And in their beds, Kira and Torin dreamed of seeds and soil, of growth and patience, of lessons that would change their lives forever. The silent observer on the balcony had seen something important. She just did not know it yet. 3 days passed, and Velka did not speak to her children about the gardener. She told herself she was too busy with the council meeting. She told herself it did not matter, but deep inside, she knew she was simply waiting, watching. Every afternoon, when the sun was warm and the shadows were long, Kira and Torin would slip away from their lessons and go to the gardens. And every afternoon, Velka would find a reason to stand near a window where she could see them. The council meeting came and went. Velka solved the dispute between the two clans, as everyone knew she would. She was praised for her wisdom and her skill with words. But her mind was not fully present. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the gardens, back to Yuna. On the 7th day, Velka made a decision. She would go to the gardens herself. She would see this human up close. She would understand what was happening with her children. The afternoon was bright and clear. Velka walked through the estate, her claws clicking on the stone floors. Servants bowed as she passed, their eyes down. No one dared to look directly at the great diplomat. She reached the doors that led to the gardens and stopped. Through the glass, she could see the rows of flowers and trees. She could see the path that wound between them like a river. And there, near the center of the garden, she could see her children sitting with Yuna. Velka did not go outside. Instead, she found a spot behind a tall hedge where she could watch without being seen. It was not a dignified thing to do. A dragon of her status should not hide like a spy. But she did it anyway. Yuna was kneeling on the ground, and Kira and Torin were kneeling beside her. The human had a small wooden box in front of her, filled with dark soil. In her hand, she held a tiny seed, no bigger than a grain of rice. "This seed is very old," Yuna said. Her voice was soft but clear. "It comes from a tree that used to grow on my home planet, Earth. The tree is called a cherry blossom." Torin leaned forward, his blue scales dusty from the soil. "How old is it?" "This seed is 500 years old," Yuna replied. "It was kept frozen in a special vault, waiting for the right moment to be planted." Kira tilted her head. "Why did they wait so long?" "Because the people who saved this seed wanted to give it to someone special, someone who would take care of it and help it grow." Yuna smiled at the two young dragons. I think you two are those special people. Velka felt something strange in her chest. She was not sure if it was anger or something else. This human was giving her children a gift, a human gift, a seed from a planet that most dragons had never even visited. Yuna placed the seed in Torin's palm. The young dragon looked at it with wonder, as if he were holding a star. "It is so small," he whispered. "Yes," Yuna agreed, "but from this small thing, a great tree can grow, a tree that will live for 1,000 years, a tree that will make flowers so beautiful. They will take your breath away." Kira reached out a claw to touch the seed gently. "How do we make it grow?" Yuna took a deep breath. "That is the hard part. Growing something is not about power. You cannot force a seed to become a tree. You cannot make it grow faster by shouting at it or threatening it." Torin laughed. "Can you make it grow with fire?" "No," Yuna said, shaking her head. "Fire would destroy it. This seed needs gentle things. Water, sunlight, good soil, and most importantly, patience." Velka watched as Yuna showed the hatchlings how to prepare the soil. She taught them how to dig a small hole, not too deep and not too shallow. She taught them how to place the seed inside and cover it gently. "Now," Yuna said, "we water it, but only a little. Too much water will drown the seed." Kira picked up a small watering can and carefully poured a few drops onto the soil. Her claws, which could tear through metal, moved as delicately as a butterfly. "Good," Yuna said. "Very good." Torin bounced with excitement. "When will it grow? Tomorrow? The next day?" Yuna laughed softly. "Not so fast. This seed will take many weeks to show even a tiny leaf. Maybe longer. You will have to wait and watch and keep caring for it even when nothing seems to be happening." The young dragon's face fell. "That is a long time." "Yes," Yuna agreed. "But that is how life works. The best things take time, the strongest trees grow slowly, the deepest roots form over many years." Velka leaned closer, her heart beating faster. There was something in Yuna's words that struck her deeply. She thought of her own work as a diplomat. How many times had she wanted things to move faster? How many times had she grown frustrated with slow negotiations? Yuna looked at the two hatchlings with kind eyes. "Let me tell you a story. On Earth, there was once a gardener who planted a bamboo seed. He watered it every day for a whole year, but nothing grew. He watered it for 2 years, then 3 years, then 4 years. Still, nothing grew above the ground." "Did the seed die?" Kira asked. "That is what everyone thought," Yuna said. "But the gardener did not give up. He kept watering. He kept believing. And in the 5th year, something amazing happened. The bamboo shot up from the ground and grew 90 feet tall in just 6 weeks. Torin's eyes went wide. 90 feet? Yes. Because for all those years when nothing seemed to be happening, the bamboo was growing its roots. Deep, strong roots that would support the tall tree it would become. Yuna touched the soil where they had planted the cherry blossom seed. Sometimes growth happens where we cannot see it. Sometimes we have to trust that our work matters, even when we cannot see the results. Velka stepped back from the hedge. Her mind was spinning with thoughts she had never had before. This human, this simple gardener, was teaching her children things that no dragon tutor had ever taught them. Things about patience, about faith, about the quiet strength of gentle care. For 300 years, Velka had believed that power came from fire and force. She had believed that strength meant being bigger, faster, and more dangerous than your enemies. But here, in this garden, a human woman was showing another kind of strength. The strength to nurture, the strength to wait, the strength to believe in things you cannot see. The sun began to set, painting the sky in colors of orange and pink. Velka watched as her children carefully placed the wooden box with their seed in a sunny spot. They were already planning when they would come back to water it. Yuna bowed to them and they bowed back. Then the hatchlings ran toward the estate, talking excitedly about their cherry blossom tree. Velka remained hidden behind the hedge. She watched Yuna stay behind, checking on other plants, pulling small weeds, whispering to the flowers as if they could hear her. And perhaps, Velka thought, they could. For the first time in many years, the great dragon Diplomat felt small, not in a bad way, but in the way you feel when you see a sky full of stars and realize how much you do not know. She walked back to the estate slowly, thinking about seeds and roots and the strange wisdom of humans. Tomorrow, she decided, she would not hide behind hedges. Tomorrow, she would step into the garden herself, and she would listen. The next afternoon, Velka did not hide. She walked into the gardens with her head held high, her golden scales bright in the sunlight. Her heart was beating fast, but she did not let it show. A diplomat never showed fear or uncertainty. Yuna was working near a bed of tall purple flowers when she saw Velka approaching. The human immediately dropped to her knees and bowed low, pressing her forehead to the ground. "My lady," Yuna said, "I did not know you would visit the gardens. If I have done something wrong, please forgive me." Velka looked down at the bowing human. For a moment, she almost turned around and left. This was strange. This was not how things were supposed to be. Dragons did not spend time with servants. But she remembered her children's laughter. She remembered the story about the bamboo. "Stand up," Velka said. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. Yuna stood slowly, keeping her eyes down. She was trembling slightly. "Look at me," Velka said. The human raised her eyes. Velka saw that they were brown, warm like the soil she worked with every day. There was fear in those eyes, but also something else. Strength, perhaps, or peace. "My children have been spending time with you," Velka said. Yuna's face went pale. "My lady, I am so sorry. They came to me, and I did not know if I should send them away." "I did not mean to. I did not say I was angry," Velka interrupted. Yuna stopped talking. She looked confused. Velka walked past her, looking at the flowers around them. "These gardens are beautiful. They have never looked better than they do now. Thank you, my lady. My children planted a seed with you yesterday, a cherry blossom." Yuna nodded carefully. "Yes, my lady. It is a very special seed. I have been saving it for many years." Velka turned to face her. "Why did you give it to them?" The question seemed to surprise Yuna. She thought for a moment before answering. "Because they were curious. Because they wanted to learn. And because I thought they deserved something beautiful to care for." "They are dragons," Velka said. "They will live for thousands of years. They will lead armies and sign treaties and change the course of history. Why would they need to care for a simple flower?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "My lady, may I speak honestly?" Velka raised an eyebrow. Servants did not usually ask such things. "You may. Your children are wonderful. They are clever and kind and full of life. But when I first met them, they seemed lonely. They had many tutors and many lessons, but no one seemed to just sit with them and listen to what they wanted to say." Velka felt a sharp pain in her chest. Was this true? Had she been so busy with her work that she had not seen her own children's loneliness? Yuna continued. "When they came to the garden, they did not want to learn about politics or war or diplomacy. They wanted to touch the flowers. They wanted to feel the soil between their claws. They wanted to know how things grew." She paused. "So I taught them. Because everyone, whether they are human or dragon, needs to create something. Everyone needs to see something grow because of their care." Velka did not know what to say. She, who had negotiated with emperors and kings, was speechless before a human gardener. At that moment, voices came from the path. Kira and Torin came running into the garden, their scales shining, their faces bright with excitement. "Yuna! Yuna!" Torin shouted. "We came to check on our seed!" Then they saw their mother. Both hatchlings stopped suddenly, their smiles fading. "Mother," Kira said, bowing her head, "we did not know you were here." Velka looked at her children. She saw the fear in their eyes. They expected her to be angry. They expected punishment. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. "Show me this seed of yours," she said. Torin and Kira looked at each other, not sure if they had heard correctly. "Go on," Velka said. "I want to see it." The hatchlings led their mother to the sunny spot where they had placed the wooden box. Yuna followed quietly behind them. Torin pointed proudly at the soil. "It is in there. It does not look like much yet, but Yuna says we have to be patient." Kira nodded seriously. "She told us a story about bamboo. It grows underground for many years before it comes up." Velka knelt down beside the wooden box. Her great body made the action look awkward, but she did it anyway. She looked at the small patch of dark soil where somewhere beneath the surface, a tiny seed was beginning its long journey. "Tell me," she said to her children, "what have you learned from Yuna?" The question opened a flood. Torin talked about how water had to be given carefully, not too much and not too little. Kira explained the importance of sunlight and how plants turned light into food through something called photosynthesis. They both talked about patience, about waiting, about trusting in things you could not see. Velka listened to every word. She watched how their eyes lit up when they spoke. She saw how much they had learned in just a few days, more than many of their formal lessons had taught them in months. When they finished, Velka stood up. She looked at Yuna, who had been standing silently nearby. "You have given my children a gift," Velka said. "A gift I did not know they needed?" Yuna bowed her head. "I only showed them what the plants taught me, my lady." "And what is that?" Yuna looked up, meeting Velka's eyes with a courage that surprised them both. "That strength is not always in fire or size. It is in patience. It is in growing something beautiful even when no one watches. It is in caring for small things because small things become big things with time and love." The words hung in the air like music. Velka felt something change inside her. It was as if a door had opened in her mind, showing her a room she had never known existed. She thought of all the years she had spent seeking power and influence. She thought of all the battles she had won with force and fear, and she wondered for the first time if there was another way, a gentler way. A way that grew from the ground up instead of burning from the top down. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the garden. The flowers seemed to glow in the golden light. "Yuna," Velka said slowly, "I would like you to continue teaching my children, not just about plants, but about everything you know." Yuna's eyes went wide. "My lady, you have wisdom that I do not have, wisdom that my children need." Velka paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Wisdom that perhaps I need as well." Kira and Torin looked at their mother with amazement. They had never heard her speak this way before. "I am only a gardener," Yuna said softly. "I am not a teacher." "You are wrong," Velka replied. "You are the best teacher I have ever met, because you teach from the heart." That evening, something new began. Velka joined her children in the garden for the first time. She sat in the dirt, not caring about her golden scales. She listened as Yuna talked about seeds and seasons, about growth and patience, about the quiet miracles that happened every day in the soil beneath their feet. And when the stars came out, the great dragon Diplomat stayed a little longer, looking at the wooden box where a tiny cherry blossom seed was dreaming of becoming a tree. Weeks passed, and the cherry blossom seed began to show life. A tiny green shoot pushed through the dark soil, reaching toward the sunlight. Kira and Torin visited it every day, watching its slow progress with wonder and pride. But something else was growing too. Something inside Velka. The great diplomat found herself spending more and more time in the gardens. She would sit beside Yuna and her children, listening to stories about Earth and its many plants. She learned about forests that covered entire continents and deserts where flowers bloomed only once every 10 years. She learned about the cycle of seasons and the dance of bees from flower to flower. At first, she told herself she was just watching over her children. Then she admitted she was curious about this strange human wisdom. Finally, she accepted the truth. She was learning. She was changing. One evening, after Kira and Torin had gone to bed, Velka stayed in the gardens alone with Yuna. The two moons of the planet hung low in the sky, their light silver and blue. "May I ask you something?" Velka said. Yuna nodded, her hands still working with the soil. She was planting night-blooming flowers that would open only in the moonlight. "You know what dragons are like. We are proud. We are powerful. We look down on species like yours." Velka paused, struggling with the words. "And yet you treat my children with such kindness. Why?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. She finished planting a seed and wiped her hands on her clothes before answering. "My lady, when I was young, there was an old woman in my village. She was not rich or powerful. She had no status or rank. But everyone loved her because she was kind to everyone she met. She taught me that kindness is not about who deserves it. Kindness is about who we want to be." Velka considered this. "But surely you must feel anger. Dragons have not treated humans well. We have used your people as servants for hundreds of years." "Yes," Yuna agreed. "That is true. And there are times when I feel angry or sad about it." She looked up at the moons. "But I have learned that holding on to anger is like holding a burning coal. It hurts me more than anyone else. So I choose to let it go. I choose to see each person, whether human or dragon, as a new beginning." Velka felt shame wash over her. For 300 years, she had seen humans as lesser beings. She had never questioned this belief. It was simply what all dragons believed. But now, sitting in the moonlight with this gentle gardener, she saw how wrong she had been. "Yuna," she said softly, "I am sorry." The words surprised both of them. Dragons did not apologize, certainly not to humans. Yuna's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you, my lady. That means more than you know." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the night-blooming flowers slowly begin to open. Their petals were white and soft, like tiny moons reaching for the sky. The next day, Velka received a message from the Ember Council. There was an emergency meeting. A small fleet of human ships had entered dragon space without permission, and several council members were calling for war. Velka flew to the great chamber where the council met. It was a massive room carved from black stone, with torches burning along the walls. 12 dragon lords sat in a circle, their scales of many colors shining in the firelight. Lord Doran, a red dragon known for his fierce temper, was speaking when Velka arrived. "These humans have insulted us. They have violated our borders. We must show them the power of dragonfire." Several others nodded in agreement. The room buzzed with angry voices. Velka took her seat and listened. She heard words she had heard many times before. Words about strength and power and dominance. Words about teaching lessons through fire and fear. But now, those words sounded different to her. They sounded hollow, empty. When the voices died down, Velka stood. The room went quiet. Everyone respected the great diplomat, even if they did not always agree with her. "My fellow council members," she began, "I have listened to your words. I understand your anger, but before we choose the path of war, Let me ask you some questions. Lord Doran snorted. What questions? The humans broke the law. They must be punished. Why did they enter our space? Velka asked. Do we know their reason? The council members looked at each other. No one had asked that question. Their ships were damaged, said Lady Mira, a silver dragon who managed the border regions. They sent distress signals before entering our territory. It seems they had no choice. Velka nodded. So they came not as invaders, but as travelers in need. And our response is to consider destroying them? They are humans, Lord Doran growled. They mean nothing. Do they? Velka asked. Her voice was calm but strong. I have spent time recently with a human, a simple gardener who works in my estate, and I have learned that humans have wisdom we have forgotten. They understand patience. They understand growth. They understand how to nurture and care for things weaker than themselves. The council members stared at her in shock. Some looked angry, others looked confused. We dragons pride ourselves on our power, Velka continued. We have fire that can burn cities. We have claws that can tear through steel. But what good is all this power if we use it only to destroy? What good is living for thousands of years if we learn nothing new? She walked to the center of the room, her golden scales catching the torchlight. This gardener taught my children something I never could. She taught them that strength is not just about being bigger or stronger. It is about being patient. It is about caring for small things. It is about growing something beautiful even when no one is watching. The room was completely silent now. I am not saying we should be weak, Velka said. I am saying we should be wise. True wisdom knows when to use force and when to show mercy. True strength can afford to be gentle, Lady Mira spoke up. What do you suggest we do about the human ships? Help them, Velka said simply. Repair their vessels, send them on their way with supplies and goodwill. Show them that dragons can be more than they expect, that we can be allies instead of enemies. Lord Doran laughed harshly. You want us to help the creatures we have ruled over for centuries? You want us to treat them as equals? Yes, Velka said. She did not flinch from his anger. Because that is what they are. Different from us, yes. Weaker in some ways, yes. But equal in their right to exist, to grow, to reach for the stars. The debate continued for hours. Voices were raised. Arguments went back and forth. But in the end, Velka's words won. The council voted to help the human ships. It was a small decision, but it was a beginning. When Velka returned home that night, she went straight to the gardens. Yuna was there, as always, tending to the flowers by moonlight. Something happened today, Velka said. Yuna looked up and saw something new in the dragon's eyes, something like hope. I spoke to the council about humans. I told them what you taught me, and they listened. Velka paused, still amazed by what had happened. Because of you, human ships will be helped instead of destroyed. Because of you, a small step toward peace was taken. Yuna's eyes filled with tears. I am just a gardener, my lady. I did not do anything. Velka knelt down beside her, her great body making the soil tremble. You planted a seed, she said, and today I saw its first small leaf break through the ground. In the wooden box nearby, the cherry blossom seedling swayed gently in the night breeze. It was tiny and fragile, but it was growing, just like the change that was beginning to spread through the Dragon Empire, all because of words from a simple gardener who believed that patience and kindness could move even the mightiest mountains. 5 years passed like leaves falling from a tree, one after another, each bringing change. The cherry blossom tree had grown tall now. It stood in the center of Velka's garden, its branches reaching toward the sky like graceful arms. Every spring, it burst into bloom with thousands of pink flowers that filled the air with sweet perfume. Visitors came from across the Dragon Empire just to see it. They called it the Human Tree, and its fame spread far and wide. But the tree was not the biggest change. That change had happened in the hearts of those who lived in the great estate, and from there, it had spread like ripples in a pond. Una was no longer just a gardener. By order of Velka herself, she had been named the first human to hold the title of Royal Mentor. She taught not only Kira and Torin, but also the children of other dragon lords who sent them to learn from her. At first, many dragons had laughed at the idea. A human teaching dragon children, it was absurd. But when they saw the results, the laughter stopped. The young dragons who studied with Una were different from others of their kind. They were patient where other dragons were hasty. They were kind where other dragons were cruel. They knew how to listen, how to wait, how to nurture, and these skills, which had once seemed weak, turned out to be powerful in ways no one had expected. Kira had grown into a young diplomat, following in her mother's footsteps. But her style was different from the dragons of old. She did not threaten or intimidate. Instead, she listened carefully to all sides of a dispute. She asked questions that no one else thought to ask. She found solutions that left everyone feeling respected and heard. Her first major success came when two dragon clans were ready to go to war over mining rights on a distant moon. Everyone expected months of angry negotiations. Instead, Kira sat with the leaders of both clans and asked them a simple question. What do you really want? Not what you think you should want. What would make your hearts happy? The question caught them off guard. No diplomat had ever asked them such a thing. After much thought, they realized they both wanted security for their families and hope for their children. The mining rights were just a symbol of these deeper needs. With this understanding, Kira helped them create a plan where both clans would share the moon's resources. They would build together instead of fighting apart. It was a solution no one had imagined, born from the simple lessons of a human gardener who understood that every conflict had roots that went deeper than the surface. Torin had taken a different path. He had become fascinated with human culture and history. He traveled to Earth and spent years living among humans, learning their ways. He studied their art, their music, their literature. He came back with a deep love for these small, short-lived creatures who created such beauty in their brief time in the universe. He started a school where dragons and humans could learn together. At first, only a few brave humans came. They were nervous, surrounded by beings who could crush them with one claw. But Torin made them feel welcome. He showed them that dragons could be friends, not masters. The school grew quickly. Soon, there were hundreds of students, then thousands. They learned not just facts and skills, but how to understand each other, how to see past differences to the shared hopes and dreams that all thinking beings held in their hearts. Velka watched all of this with pride and wonder. She was older now, over 300 years old, which was middle age for a dragon. But she felt younger than she had in decades. The weight she had carried for so long, the burden of constant strength and endless power, had lifted from her shoulders. She still served on the Ember Council, but her voice had changed. Where once she had spoken of strategy and dominance, now she spoke of cooperation and growth. Not all the other council members agreed with her. Some, like Lord Doran, still believed in the old ways. But more and more dragons were listening. More and more were beginning to understand. One evening, Velka walked through her gardens with Una by her side. The cherry blossom tree was in full bloom, its pink petals drifting down like gentle snow. "Do you remember the first day you saw me with your children?" Una asked. Velka smiled. "I remember hiding behind a hedge like a spy, too proud to admit I was curious." Una laughed. "I was so frightened when you came to the garden that day. I thought you would send me away, or worse." "I almost did," Velka admitted. "I almost told my children to stay away from you. I thought you were filling their heads with foolish ideas." She paused under the cherry tree, looking up at its graceful branches. I did not understand that foolishness and wisdom often look the same at first glance. They stood together in comfortable silence. Around them, the garden was alive with color and sound. Birds sang in the trees. Insects hummed among the flowers. Small creatures moved through the bushes, living their tiny lives. "What you have done is remarkable," Velka said softly. "You have changed an empire with nothing but seeds and stories." Yuna shook her head. "I only planted. You and your children did the growing. You made the choice to listen, to learn, to change. That took more courage than anything I have ever done." Velka reached down and gently took one of the falling cherry blossoms in her great claw. The pink petal looked impossibly small against her golden scales. "When I was young," she said, "I dreamed of being remembered as a great warrior. I wanted statues built in my honor. I wanted songs sung about my victories in battle." She looked at the petal with soft eyes. "Now I dream of something different. I dream of a future where dragons and humans walk together as equals, where strength and gentleness are not enemies, but partners, where we measure ourselves not by what we can destroy, but by what we can grow." Yuna smiled, her eyes bright with tears. "That is a beautiful dream." "It is your dream," Velka said. "I am just borrowing it." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, the first stars were beginning to appear. Kira and Torin came walking through the garden, talking and laughing together. They had grown so much in these 5 years. They were no longer the lonely children who had sat in the dirt with a human gardener. They were young leaders now, respected and admired. But some things had not changed. They still came to the garden every evening. They still watered the cherry blossom tree, even though it no longer needed their help. It was a ritual, a reminder of where their journey had begun. "Mother! Yuna!" Torin called out. "Come see! The new night flowers are about to bloom." Velka and Yuna walked over to join them. Together, the 4 of them watched as the white petals slowly opened in the fading light. In that moment, standing under the cherry blossom tree with her children and her teacher, Velka felt complete. The great diplomat, who had once believed only in power, had learned a greater truth, that the smallest seeds could become the mightiest trees, that the gentlest words could change the hardest hearts, that the future was not something to be conquered, but something to be grown, carefully and patiently, with love. Far across the galaxy, in the halls of the Ember Council and in the streets of human cities, the changes continued to spread. It would take many more years, perhaps centuries, before the old ways were fully left behind. But the seed had been planted. The roots were growing deep and strong. And it had all started with a dragon diplomat who saw her human gardener instructing her children and chose to stop and listen instead of turning away. That was the moment that changed their futures. That was the moment that changed everything. The cherry blossoms drifted down around them like pink stars, each one a promise of springs yet to come.